Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that's going on currently as we are watching the war. We're watching the conflict between the US and Iran as well as Israel. But Israel did a preemptive attack. I don't know if you guys have been watching this, but this has been very dire because this is a war that Americans really never wanted. And everybody is currently reporting on it. I just want to give you guys some sound bites here very quickly as we kind of understand what's going on in the world and how that's going to affect us and how we should potentially move on and not just vote people in office that we think is not only good for the internal part of the US, but do not forget, unfortunately, we've made a lot of enemies of late. Okay, a lot of people was neutral with us because we continue to be staunch supporters of Israel, no matter what they do. And I think that's diabolically evil, in my opinion.
Minutes ago, but Fox News can confirm that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead following Israeli strikes against his compound and location earlier today. A senior Israeli official confirmed.
Okay, so they currently killed one of the top leaders in Iran in support of Israel once again. And I just want to kind of break this down to a point where I want to tell people what time it really is. It's not foreign policy time. It's somebody lit a match to the gas pump and called it self-defense time because today, ladies and gentlemen, Israel announced it launched a preemptive strike against Iran, and then U.S. strikes were underway as well from a lot of the aircraft carrier. I believe we have two in the area. And this is, of course, reporting from a lot of Reuters. And here's the part that I believe that a lot of people are missing. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This has been occurring with little skirmishes, little battles. This happened while the U.S. and Iran nuclear talks were active this month. But that's the part that no one's really mentioning. Earlier this month, Iran was actually in talks with the U.S. to once again reassure the U.S. that they don't have a nuclear program when it comes to missiles and atomic bombs. And I believe that a lot of these talks happen between Oman and Qatar, if you guys are familiar with that. Because I know Oman, there were a lot of the mediators that was trying to get diplomacy and people to meet heads and not to, and to prevent what's occurring right now. So now the question becomes, what was the preemptive reason? Why did this officially start? What's the real history and why now? Again, I'm not going to give you guys any propaganda. I'm just going to give you guys reports because this is still ongoing as we are live here today. They're still covering this. This is still, very chaotic. And again, America, we're in the middle of it. We are absolutely in the middle of it. We are supportive of this. Because this is when Israel basically stated that, hey, today we launched a preemptive attack to remove threats to the state of Israel, per Defense Minister Israel Katz. And basically what they're going to basically come out and say that we have overwhelming intelligence and evidence that Iran was going to attack us, so we had to attack first. Seemed like I had some difficulties there. They didn't shut down my screen, ladies and gentlemen. Boy, they hate when your boy be rocking and rolling. Give me 1 second. I'm still trying to set back up here. I don't know what occurred, but I do appreciate you guys who stayed. Okay, I do appreciate you guys who stayed, because I think this is a very important conversation to have, instead of me doing my regular dialogues here, because this is ongoing. And the way that I won't tell you how to look at it, but I will give you sort of my insight, the way I'm looking at it. Because when we really look at it with full transparency, Israel and the U.S. framed the action around Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs amid warnings they would strike again if Iran pressed ahead. But again, Iran had warned it would retaliate, and it said it could target U.S. bases in a lot of the neighboring countries. That's what they was referring to, okay? And Iran has done just that. And the warnings that become very relevant once U.S. involvement is confirmed. And believe me, there's a lot of public talk. I say I got things popping up. I do apologize. My computer haphazardly has some malfunctions there. But what the U.S. and what the U.S. and Israel are basically stating is that they still believe that Iran has a nuclear infrastructure and enrichment capabilities, and that indeed is a threat. Okay, I don't know what targets, what information, the intelligence around it that they have to preempt. My question is, what are the targets? What were the targets? Because they not only destroy property, destroy so-called Iranian bases, but they also kill one of their leaders as well. Because this is the ongoing information that I believe Americans receive, that Iran's ballistic missiles are a threat. Iran's regional network proxies are a threat. Therefore, this preemptive action to prevent future catastrophe. And what preemptive really means in practice. Is this a win for the U.S.? Is it a win for Israel? Preemptive is the word that we use when you want to sound like we had no choice, because that's what people are going to defend this. Israel had no choice. Am I anti-Israel? No. Am I anti-Semitic? No. But every time that Israel is involved in something, the U.S. is right beside them. Good, bad, right, ugly, upside down, backwards, whatever it may be, we're right there. And I really wanted to know, and maybe people who are more spiritual based, their foundation, maybe you guys know why America stands with Israel regardless of what they do. We don't stand like this with the EU. We don't stand like this with France. We don't stand with this with Spain and Italy and Great Britain and the UK. We don't stand with other countries like this. We haven't stood with Ukraine like this. I'm just asking questions, because what they're going to do to the American people, because we're going to be the largest country, okay, under the constitutional rights of our freedom, that's going to really speak out against this. And I'm not saying this again, because you have to keep stating this, because people are taking and run with it, being anti-Semitic at all. They're going to trump this up, keyword Trump. They're going to trump this up and to preemptive, here is doing political work. And they're going to say, they're going to use psychological psyops of selling urgency, justifying escalation, and rewriting the timeline. So this looks like a sudden necessity, not a strategic decision. Now, if you guys have been alive longer than the TikTok trend, you've heard this soundtrack before. This the other day, I don't know if you guys watched that interview between Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee, who is the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Now, if you ask Tucker, he called it like Israel does what it wants and the U.S. allows it. And from what we're seeing, because if you guys saw that sort of interview, but it was more like a debate almost between Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee, Tucker's argument summed up cleanly is basically Israel can act unilaterally, but the U.S. will always get implicated, as we have today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking at a lot of the headlines. It says U.S. strikes Iran. Now, the first initial reports is that Israel had a preemptive strike against Iran, meaning they struck first, and then the U.S. followed from our aircraft carriers in the area. But he's also on record through ABC reporting calling the attack absolutely disgusting and evil. And not that I'm going to make this piece all about Tucker Carlson, but it was a very timely interview. It was a very timely interview. I believe that interview happened within the past 2 weeks or so, last week or so. It's politically important for the years that the stereotype of Israel controlling America really counts for. The right is always pro-war. That's what I'm hearing. The right is always pro-war, and that the left is always pro-peace. Not anymore. If you got a loud wing saying, we are bleeding for this, that this shift is real, and it changes the U.S. domestic landscape around Israel policy. Here's another question for you guys. Is Israel controlling the U.S.? Does Israel have strong influence over the U.S.? I'm just asking questions because I do not know. But let me give you what I believe is the precise factual version. A UN independent international commission of inquiry issued a report and a press release stating that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Not from me, but from the UN. And of course, Israel rejects that findings and publicly called it a malicious genocide. We're building up because do not forget, this is all in the area of Palestine, from the, people say from the river to the sea, but we're talking about Syria, Jordan, Yemen, Oman. That this holy land, this ground was promised to the Jews in the Bible as well as the Torah. See those large land masses in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all this land supposedly biblically belongs to the Jews. But if my memory serves me correctly, 1947, 1948, the UN partition plan carved out, they initially made a deal with the Palestinian officials to buy land. So the first initial land that Israelis took, they actually paid for. But then because of skirmishes, battles, wars, whether it be a 6-day war, 12-day war, their borders expanded. That's not rhetoric, that's a fact. And now we see how many men, women, and children have died from this war that was stemming from a terrorist attack, which nobody really condones. No, I don't believe no good person is pro-Hamas and anti-Jews just because. No. I'm pretty sure most people would be anti-Hamas, that you're not going to root for and cheer for and celebrate innocent people being killed, regardless of what their religion, ethnic affiliation, or whatever, especially if they were doing a peaceful event. But I think if we put things into perspective, I think the rough number of people who were affected was 1,200 Israeli Jews. But then on the Palestinian side, we're up to what, 40 to 60,000 people killed, missing, dismembered, amputated, etc. And then the UN calls it a genocide. Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice There was a case brought by South Africa. It's still ongoing, and the ICJ issued a provisional. They issued a provisional measures and discussed plausibility and risk. But of course, the UN has not issued a final merit ruling of actually declaring genocide. Right? You always have to leave that wiggle room for people. This is crazy, ladies and gentlemen. America kidnaps a president in Venezuela. Many Americans justified it. Now, here's my question, not to deter from what we're currently talking about, but the actions that America took. Now, I'm a 20-year veteran. I'm just I want to understand international law a lot better. Was a report sent to the UN? The UN said, okay, you can do that, Mr. President. You can do that, American government. Check. You're going to kidnap the president and his wife of Venezuela. Then bring them to America. Then bring him to America and send him through our legal system. Wait a minute. Has anybody ever thought that I'm a president, or I was a president of a country? I was then kidnapped with my wife, but now I'm going to court in America, in New York somewhere. Why am I not attending an international court? Why is the UN not here? Why are other ambassadors and bodies of the different countries that are part of the UN here? Again, I'm very ignorant of the fact that I do not know a lot of international law, and what America did was just or unjust, legal or illegal. But I'm just asking questions. I'm pretty sure a lot of Americans want to know that information as well. But America has assisted Israel in attacking Iran. And we have to think about it. October 7th, 2023, regional spillover. The Israel-Hamas war escalated. Iran-Israel confrontation from proxy pressure into wider regional volatility. Again, we have to track all these things that are occurring that's dealing with Israel. And then the U.S. carried out strikes on Iran that kind of links to targets. Let me read some of your notes. I don't want to lose anybody of what's going on currently right now. People have an effective shadow global government. It's an inside job, and Dems are backing this attack too. We're surrounded by enemies. Absolutely. This is why I keep telling you guys, when it comes to these two parties, Democrat or Republican, people are so emotionally attached to this. I'm not saying pay no attention to the government. I'm not saying be anti-government. What I'm saying is hold government officials' feet to the fire and to their word. And this is my opinion. You shouldn't claim, you shouldn't voice that you are a Democrat or Republican. I can understand someone describing their behavior. I have a conservative mindset, do for self, work hard, go out and get it. I don't want to be over-governed. I don't want to be overtaxed. I don't want to build a welfare state in America so we can look like Europe, little small, tiny apartments or flats, as they say, and then paying 40%, 45% in taxes, but you can have universal health care. Can America have universal health care? Hell yeah. And we wouldn't have to pay extra taxes. Do you see the amount of foreign aid that America pays to all these other countries? Do you guys know about that? Do you know all the money that the Democrats have spent with illegal immigration? And here's another component that people are missing, because they want us to be divided, right? Whether you are a Democrat or Republican, they want you guys to be divided between these party lines. But this is the one thing I'm going to keep quoting. Did you know that majority of the businesses on the border, their farms, their meat manufacturer, right? They have all sorts of produce, fruit, all by the border. Did you know that majority of those business owners are Republican? They are the ones who are incentivizing illegal immigration. See, the Democrats, they just crank open the gate, right? They give them a boat so they can go over the river. But the Republicans are the ones who are employing them. You see what I'm saying? But nobody wants to do that. People would like to make excuses and very inflammatory arguments about these two different sides. I don't think you should trust no politician until you apply pressure and have them to write legislation even before they get into office. And by the way, have them notary. Like once you're in office, you're going to try to get this passed. That's the problem in America, in my opinion, when it comes to politics. Let's see here. Gator says there's been some interesting discussions for the last 2 years predicting this from an insider on YouTube. No. This is one of those very predictable things. So I don't believe nobody, even myself, we were talking about this last year before last. We were talking about there's a possible World War III. You can look at my channel. There's a possible World War III that is going to include Iran, Russia, North Korea, and possibly even China. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you guys to think about this because I don't want this to occur at all. Our lives will be changed forever if we are still around. But if Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, all these Middle Eastern countries combine forces with Russia, North Korea, China, and India, do you believe that the Western world will have a chance? And we're just talking about the EU and America. Australia may come out and send about 2,000 troops. And don't forget Africa, a lot of African countries, right? On the continent of Africa, a lot of African countries may support China and Russia. Why? Because a lot of African countries get their natural gas and their oil from Russia. A lot of African countries have gotten their roads, okay, their infrastructures built by China. If you just did a quick Google search, you did a quick Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever you use, I want you guys to look at the countries that are heavily in Africa right now doing billion-dollar deals. It's China and Russia. America tried to get into this late before Joe Biden came out of office. I said that's one of the good things he tried to do. He really tried to do some contracts in Africa, the most mineral-rich country in the world. They have more resources in Africa than the world combined. So that's why people are going to Africa to do, business deals and such. But Russia and China have been doing business deals with them for the past, 10, 20 years. We're behind the power curve. And then we're pissing off our allies. Don't get me wrong. I was a supporter of the tariffs. But again, you can be a supporter of something and not know the extent of it. Okay, you're going to raise taxes. You're going to raise tariffs. Okay, 3-5%. No, he's raising it 50, 60%. Like, you can't strong arm. You see, you can't strong arm every business deal. Can we get something in the middle? Because I already know the Democrats, they wouldn't even done anything like this, which necessarily might not have been good. Then on the other hand, Trump gets into office, he does something like this. A lot of American people are supportive of this. They're in support of deportation, mass deportation of illegal immigrants, and they are supportive of these tariffs. But are we supportive of tariffs that are 30 and 40 and 50% of our allies? And what they would do to their economy, and then they're just going to increase prices on groceries, gas in America? Because here's the thing. Did you guys watch the State of Union? I did, unfortunately. But I heard a lot of lies. I heard a lot of truth being stretched that end up in a lie. They're talking about inflation is down, that the American economy is booming. Do you know how many people got laid off, Mr. President, or whoever supports everything he says? Because you can be a Trump supporter and not support everything he says and understand that he lies just like any other politician. I know there's a Trump cult out there somewhere that he just can't do no wrong. But there's some things that I can agree that America actually needed. But I don't know you guys understand about this attack right here that a suspected Israeli strike, again, hit an Iranian consular building in Damascus and supposedly killing a lot of the Iranian generals and advisors. But Iran responded with 300 plus drone missiles. Their first direct attack on Israel. Are you guys familiar with the 12-day war? I wonder if you guys are familiar with the 12-day war. Let me see what you guys are saying over here. You said we're forgetting. Gator says, I'm neither because neither side. We already pay for universal health care. If you got rid of the Department of War, it is not real. And the rest of the leeches, the rich have brought the entire government. Yeah, that was just symbolism. I mean, I know if anyone, people are still calling it Department of Defense. And to your point, some people would agree with you that we do have universal health care in America because you can't go to any hospital. Some hospitals back in the day used to push you out with a gunshot wound. But most hospitals in America would take you in, they have to provide care. And some people are using emergency rooms as their clinics. And guess who pays for that? You and I, the American taxpayer. So you may think of it as universal health care, but somebody's paying for it in America. Somebody always is. Now, during that 12-year war, now the CFR report that the IAEA, if I can recall it correctly, that the declaration that Iran was violating non-proliferation obligations and followed by Iran announcing a secret enrichment site, then Israel struck and then Iran retaliated. This is during that 12-day war. Remember, you had a 6-day war, 12-day war, whatever. And then the U.S. intervened directly against nuclear sites, right? You guys remember that. This explicitly frames the February 2026 strike that is happening right after that, 12-day air war. But again, as we're looking at this live, ladies and gentlemen, U.S. resumes nuclear negotiations in February. This is the last day. But here's the part I really don't understand. I don't know if you guys understand this as well. Iran signaled it would discuss nuclear curbs for sanctions relief, but not tied to missiles. It seemed as though, given the reports, that Iran was actually playing ball, that we're not going to create a nuclear bomb. We're not going to enrich our uranium. But I think it was one point in the negotiations that alerted Israel and America, okay? Not giving them just cause, but it's something that Iran was talking about that is not going to totally give up enrichment entirely. Like they're going to have some form of enrichment. Now, I don't know the details of that just yet, but nevertheless, that's the information that was given. But again, these February talks that occurred, it ended without a deal. So there was no progress. And now we have the preemptive strike. And they were talking about that this plan, they've been planning this for months. Because regardless of the nuclear deals going well or falling apart like they did, chances are Israel probably still would have stuck Iran. They probably would have still struck Iran. So this is the first official layer in what's possibly a very long war that America, once again, will be paying billions of dollars. We pay billions of dollars to Ukraine, and what's going on now? Who has anyone talked about Ukraine lately? What's going on with Ukraine? Where's the billions of dollars? Where's the money? But we can continue to have these very long nuclear disputes about Iran. But one thing I'm noticing here, when you guys went to the ballot box, when you guys went to go vote, we did for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, did you guys see any of this that's going on right now? This is 1% of the world fighting, while 99% of the world is in the middle. Now, you can call this conspiracy theory, you can call this conjecture, rhetoric. This is just my perspective. I believe 1 to 2% of people in the world controls the world. That's people who are in government and people who are the elites with these multi-billion-dollar businesses, right? These conglomerates. I'm not going to get into names and Illuminati. I'm not getting all that. The very rich, powerful people that you barely see and people hiring these governments. I believe they are the ones pulling the strings. Boy, I tell you, that's the second time, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologize. I believe that I've already been hacked this year. Let me make sure everyone can hear me. I've already been hacked this year. I put on every two-factor authentication that anyone could possibly even think of. Okay. But I've been hacked. In the past 5 years, I've been hacked twice. So I must be doing something right. I must be doing something right. But I do want to get this back up on the screen here. Give me 1 second. I'm still setting up again. Again, I do apologize. I have the Geek Squad coming on Tuesday because I have no idea, but my computer has been attacked a couple of times. But let's get right into it before it happens again, because if it happens again, I'm just going to end the broadcast. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I just want to kind of give you my perspective on this, because I wonder why the U.S. supports Israel so hard. Can anybody speak to that? Why does the U.S. support Israel so hard? Is it because the UN partition plan that I spoke about earlier, or is it because the Bible said something about it? And the answer is yes, but not how you think. It's not one reason, it's a stack, a layered cake of strategy, politics, religion, guilt, and I believe leverage. America didn't wake up one morning and say, you know what? Israel forever. I don't think America did that. I don't think America just haphazardly woke up one day and like Israel forever. I believe that the relationship got built like a highway system, one ramp at a time. Because I kind of want to go through this. I've been wanting to talk about this for a very long time because America and Israel has a strong relationship. And a lot of us people think it's been ordained by the Holy Bible. A lot of us believe they're a strategic part of the region and we need partners in that region. Why do America need friends around the world in every region? Don't get me wrong, we have some of the best intelligence in the world because we have people from all over the world. We would have people to be recruited by the CIA, then go back to their country and report on their own country to America. But we need partners in the area. Why is America and Israel tied at the hip? And again, I can go back to the UN partition plan of 1947. That wasn't marriage. It was just a birth certificate. But that plan basically said split the land into two states. We're talking about the land that both Israel and Palestine reside on. And like every international plan made by people who didn't live there. And so what happened immediately turned into chaos. So yes, the UN plan actually matters because on an international legal stage, they have a right to that area, but it didn't automatically create the U.S.-Israel relationship that we see today. Out of all countries, why America? Why not the UK, Great Britain, France, Germany, EU, African countries, Australia, India, South American countries? I tell you why, because early on, America still wanted to keep influence with Arab states. The U.S. wasn't trying to be emotionally bonded. It was trying to be geopolitically positioned. So if somebody tells you it's just because of the UN and that we was adhering to the UN, America is one of the founding fathers of the UN. See, that's the part that keeps skipping. Now, here's the real beginning of the relationship recognition. Because in 1948, Israel declared statehood and the U.S. recognized it basically immediately. Now, let's think about this for a second. The U.S. recognized Israel as a state back in 1948, but I recall last year Donald Trump did not recognize the state of Palestine as a state. Am I missing something here? You know, that's like meeting somebody and moving them into your apartment the same day. And I got it. There's a mix of post-World War II moral weight. There's the Holocaust aftermath, domestic politics, and the U.S. wanted to be on the right side of history in real time or the right side of the Bible, however you want to look at it. But even then, support wasn't always unconditional. Do you guys know we actually have evidence that the state of Israel stole nuclear materials out of the state of the United States? Allegedly, but we have evidence. We have evidence that the state of Israel actually taken nuclear materials from America, which started their nuclear program in Israel, allegedly. People forget this part. It ruins a lot of people. It's always been God's plan storyline that the land there was theirs. And even though multiple reports of the people in Israel come from Eastern Europe, I digress. Because if you really look back into how Jews came to be, And I know a lot of biblical scholars are going to examine this. They're going to tell me that I'm right. But they're almost like derivatives or descendants of the Canaanites. The Canaanites to the Levites, the Levites to modern day Jews. And if you ever look up their race, if you ever look up the Jews' race, if you really do some research, I've seen an extensive amount of my research came that Jews are from Northern Europe as well as Sub-Saharan Africa, and that they are a mixed people. They can be brown in color, olive in color. They can be lighter. So here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever talk to a Jewish person, they would tell you, you're like, okay, so what race or what ethnic are you? I'm ethnically a Jew. What does that mean? What does that truly mean? I thought being Jewish was a religion. Well, it's that too. And is it ethnic? Well, it depends. What it depends on? It depends on your bloodline. Well, can we test your blood to see if you are, DNA, RNA, a Jew? Do we have we cracked the human genome? Have we cracked the human? We have. Do we have any DNA samples from the Canaanites, from the Levites, to what we know as Jews? Like, do we have that? That's just some side questions for you guys. Because, in the 1950s, they had the Suez crisis. You had Israel, Britain, France. It was all this drama. And the U.S. pressured withdrawal. This was during the time I think America was not always ride or die, because we have been ride or die for a very long time, except in Vietnam. Let's forget about Vietnam. And the early relationship was more like, when it came to Israel, we support you, but we don't burn the whole region down at first. And believe me, that matters because it proves the alliance wasn't purely biblical. It was political and it was strategic, adjustable. But then the next era hit. The Cold War era is where the relationship changes from support to partnership between Israel and the U.S. Because when the U.S. is staring at the Soviet Union like we're not letting them run the board, the Middle East becomes a chessboard every single time. And Israel becomes a piece that can move. Not because everybody's praying, but because everybody's planning. This is where, again, in my opinion, that the U.S. starts seeing Israel like an intelligent partner with the Mossad, military partner with the IDF, stable outpost in a very chaotic region, and a force that can counter hostile regimes and influence. Then if you fast forward from the 1950s to around 1973, the U.S. airlift support during the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War, you guys are familiar with that. And believe me, that wasn't a symbolic friendship. That is where Israel and America, like, we're in this together. And that was the wedding. That's what really, in my opinion, tied us to Israel. And after that, the relationship hardened into something else. Not just a moment that we're going to have this relationship, but a machine. A machine, weapon systems, joint exercises, intel coordination, long-term aid, all these different frameworks created around and in and between with Israel. So by today, you don't even have to decide support in the same way, because the support is baked into agreements and budgets and committees, lobby networks, diplomatic routines, and national security mindsets. Like, we can't do anything without them. This is why when something happens like a preemptive strike, America isn't reacting like a neutral country, because we're not neutral. It's funny when I think about a bully. I want you guys to think about that. Two bullies. Can Israel possibly beat Iran without America? No. I don't know if you guys know how large Iran is. Let me see if I can pop up a world map for you guys. I'm not saying you guys are bad in geography. I'm just saying that a graphical representation will let us know how truly large Iran is. I don't think from a strategic standpoint that that Israel can beat Iran in a war by itself with no support from America. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let me see if they give me the grade here. I can show you what I'm looking at. Give me 1 second here. Now, I'm looking at Iran, right? You got Tehran, the capital, up here. Okay. Let's see. Let's go Iran to Israel. Okay. Let's see what it does. Why is it not giving us? I kind of wanted to give us a straight line, but it hasn't done that. But I really wanted you guys to see. Now, look at Israel and look at Iran. Can you guys see that? I try to build it up as much as I can. Let me get this off the. Now, this area here where my cursor is all Iran, okay? There should be a line here, some sort of break. Let me see if I can zoom in because Iraq is right here as well. But this whole area is Iran. Iran is bigger than Iraq, okay? And then look at Israel. Look at Israel, ladies and gentlemen. Again, without America, they wouldn't have a chance against Iran. So America reacts like a business partner who co-signed the lease. Yep. There's no way. There's no way.
We are at war with Iran. Israel has forced America into this war. We've attacked with Israel. Israel says that they've struck 500 sites within Iran. 57 young kids being killed already, at least. They struck an elementary school in the middle of Tehran, killed at least 57 kids. The full casualties might be about 63 people, 92 injured. They claim that they've killed the Ayatollah. The Iranians say that isn't true. Will Trump be held accountable? Will they use the War Powers Act?
I mean, he always asks these questions like they're going to be answered. They're not going to be answered, guy. All right. Let me finish up because I know there's a lot of people on at first and they dropped off because of my technical issues. I do apologize. But there's the other side. That was the political side that I was giving you guys. Now, another question would be, does the U.S. support Israel? Because the Bible said so. Now, officially, no, the State Department is not supposed to run on the book of Ezekiel, okay? But politically, millions of Americans voters absolutely treat Israel like it's a biblical obligation, right? No one's, and again, this is not to be anti-Semitic. This is giving you fact. Now, if somebody is going to emotionally charge what I'm stating, then it is what it is. So when millions of voters treat something like it's a holy duty, politicians treat it like a career requirement. Have you noticed every single politician, 99% of them, never ever criticizes Israel and what they do. And that's the truth. This worldwide is what people call Christian Zionism, right? Because that's what even Mike Huckabee stated when he was having that interview with Tucker Carlson in Israel. Christian Zionism, the belief that supporting Israel aligns with God's plan and prophecy. And we have a lot of Christian Zionists here. And believe me, that engine behind the belief is scripture, verses that people use like some sort of divine receipt. But let me show you the ones that gets deployed the most without turning this into a church service, right? If you guys are familiar with the verse Genesis 12, verse 3, right? That's a lot of people's favorite. I will bless those who bless you. And this is in reference to Israel. Now, if you bring this into America political Christianity, this becomes support Israel equals America blessed. Oppose Israel equals America curse. So is this a political affiliation or a biblical affiliation that we have, or a tie? Because now we have foreign policy becomes a slot machine. Put in support and blessings come out. Put in support, blessings come out. That's not diplomacy, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you call spiritual gambling. Then we also have the verse that's pertaining to the land. Then you get the land promise framing. That was in Genesis 15. Promised land, and the idea that the land is God deeded. And people treat that like a warranty, do they not? God promised that land to Israel, so the title is permanent. Then you get Psalms language like pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But in politics, pray for the peace often gets translated into support whatever Israel does. And that's where the verse stops being devotional, becomes a political shield. You also have Ezekiel 37. That get used like a headline. Bring them into their land. So modern return. So the modern, right, return becomes prophecy fulfillment. And once something is prophecy, once something is, prophecy fulfillment, criticism becomes blasphemy. So we cannot question, we can't be critical, we can't critique, because it turns into blasphemy. And that's why everybody who says anything negative about Israel, especially if you are important, especially if you are a figure of some sort, Kanye West, the entire U.S. turns their back on you. That's why arguments get so emotional, because you're not debating policy anymore. You're debating somebody's end times identity. The God's covenant still applies argument. If you guys ever looked at Romans 11, right? Romans 11, God hasn't cast away his people. So for many believers, Israel remains special. Therefore, political support is morally required. And here's a part that a lot of people don't like to admit. That interpretation is not universally agreed on, not even among Christians. There are Christians who argue that the covenant text don't automatically map into a modern nation state, because it does not. And foreign policy should not be run like a prophecy calendar. I'm getting every call in the world, guys. But if someone tells you the Bible demands your support of modern day Israel, of the land that the UN carved out in 1947, and America recognized Israel as a nation state in 1948, but not Palestine, of the people that were already there, maybe this is a theological argument and not a universally accepted fact. I don't know. But nevertheless, U.S. in politics, it functions like a fact because it's backed by our vote. But anyway, the UN partition is the birth certificate. Truman recognition is the first handshake. Cold War strategy is the wedding. Military plus intelligence integration is the mortgage. Domestic politics is the prenup. And Christian Zionism is the emotional glue that keeps a big chunk of America defending the whole setup like it's a salvation issue. So that's why when Israel moves, the U.S. flinches, because the relationship isn't casual, it's institutional. And some people say it's spiritual for some voters, strategic for the Pentagon, political for Congress, and automatic for the machine. So when people ask, why does Israel get to do what it wants? I'll give you guys some uncomfortable answers. Because America has designed a relationship where Israel's security claims triggers U.S. action, or at a minimum, U.S. protection almost by default with the American dollars that are everlasting, that never ends, that never runs out because we keep paying taxes. And I'm not saying don't pay taxes, pay your taxes. And once you're in a relationship like that, this preemptive strike that Israel have done on Iran, and then a follow-up attack by America, preemptive becomes a word, coordination becomes a plan. And we didn't authorize this becomes a press release. That's all that really is. You guys have a good one.